My discreet approach is to go to fewer people and really show them properties and projects that I'm not putting out there into the ether so that everyone can see it, but really going to the right people the right way and showing them a project or a property that that truly does have that great potential. So I'm still a little bit old-fashioned.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where great minds in real estate get together.
Welcome back to the Property Podcast. We're kicking off today with a massive dive into the high stakes of world of commercial real estate. My guest today is Nicola Horsburgh, founder of Weld Capital Partners, unlocking the secret of how private capital is dominating the market. Nicolas, thank you for being here.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Angelina. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's just jump straight into the big money. How does Weld Capital connect those powerful family offices to the absolute hottest commercial real estate deals out there? Give us the map.
Sure. So first of all, I started out in residential real estate about 12 years ago. I did larger asset off-market brokerage here where I'm based in New York City. When COVID hit, I chose to go national, which was more Florida, the Southeast, and of course still New York and New England. And I started advising larger groups like Hard Rock, lenders on the debt side. And I truly did learn and I taught myself how to underwrite. First, how to understand underwriting, then how to underwrite the private credit side of deals. So that's the debt side on any capital stack. And so I was able to spot the good sponsors, the good principals. So even though I at that point was still advising my clients on what to buy, I was figuring out that that was a very hard space within commercial real estate. You didn't really know who was representing the sale of the property, who really knew that principal or that sponsor. So I kind of quickly pivoted and picked up the phone to the sponsors, the developers that I thought were the most interesting, the most talented, and said, hey, look, how can I help you guys with your next project? And when you ask someone to help raise their money, and it depends on how you do it, they generally agree. So I started figuring out how best to market other people's projects. And once I figured out what you like to say, Angelina, the secret sauce of what makes a deal interesting and how to market it so it seems and is special. And those profits and the returns are real, and the underwriting of that deal, the numbers behind it are real and conservative. Once I started doing that successfully in a multifamily and in hospitality and in mixed use, which is retail and either rental properties or condos, as some people know, in Florida right now, and in larger urban areas, you have hotels and condos, and kind of understanding the kind of complicated but relatively easy to understand if you put a little time into it. Once I could do that for other people, I decided to kind of do it for myself in smaller deals. And maybe we could talk a little bit about what Weld Capital, which is the advisory and the strategy group that I started and still have, what I also do now. I think that might also be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So you use your client as a guinea pig, and then you become your own case study eventually, right?
Right. You're right. I don't know if I would tell my clients that they were guinea pigs, but in a sense, they certainly helped me to understand enough to shift into being a principal myself and raising money and executing on commercial size deals.
Interesting. And so tell me something. How do you manage to do all of these great things in a very discreet way?
So that's a choice you make. It really is. There's a lot of groups that do large email blast marketing, that have podcasts that you'll see on Instagram. You'll see syndicators, large syndicators who make big promises, and sometimes they deliver and sometimes they don't, but they're raising from individual LPs, and they'll take 5,000 or 10,000 smaller size checks. And what I've found, some of them have been my clients, is that, and some of them I've said, I'm sorry, I can't help because I'm not behind what what you're saying you're going to do and then what you actually end up doing and how this looks like it's going to perform. And so over COVID and after COVID, you saw a lot of the syndicators really struggling. And that's because they couldn't raise that LP equity. People kind of caught on to what they were doing, which was not putting any of their own equity in and borrowing all the equity from LPs. But then they were struggling to convince the lenders that it was going to work this time. So they couldn't get their debt. So a lot of the syndicators kind of struggled, even though they had this amazing marketing campaign. What
Yeah.
they were marketing wasn't super special. So my discreet approach is to go to fewer people and really show them properties and projects that I'm not putting out there into the ether so that everyone can see it, but really going to the right people the right way and showing them a project or a property that 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 truly does have that great potential. So I'm still a little bit old fashioned. I pick up the phone. I know a lot about my partners.
Yeah.
Partnerships are the most important thing. If you don't have good partners, you won't have a good deal. And that includes the LPs, not just the GP. And so if you go to my website, weldcapitalpartners.com, you're not going to see all that much. You'll be able to reach me. You'll be able to see maybe our strategies, a few of our projects, but you won't necessarily see what we're doing now and who we're doing it with.
Interesting. So essentially, you're delivering facts over promises, personal approach over big advertising and false promises. That's what I hear from you.
Yeah, and if you think about the phrase private equity, I take the private part of private equity seriously. A lot of the people that I work with don't want the world to know what they're doing. And I certainly respect what my partners are hoping to do. And that is to make very strong profits and keep it to themselves or let them have the choice of who they tell, how, and when.
That makes total sense. The private part is very strong. And it actually resonates to me also. I wouldn't want people to know my own personal business.
Right.
So how well make multi-asset advice look so effortless for your clients?
Well, I don't know if I make it effortless. I think that it could be a client or it could be a potential partner. I use some softwares which help. So if I'm sending out an offering, I use a product called Agora, or there's a couple others that I use, and I send out a very streamlined offering. And that's that last step in raising money. So the LPs or the lenders that are going to come on alongside my client get a very clean, easy 1 or 2 page offering memorandum in their email, in their inbox, right from me. And if they're interested, then we go in, into a little bit more depth, of course, before they invest. And how I advise and I make it look effortless in one way or another is just like anything. Preparation and knowledge of the market before I get on any call with a potential client. So with my relatively newer company, Haven, what we do there is my partners and I sit down, and this is what we did for Florida, and it's what we are doing now out in the Hamptons, which is that it's a high net worth leisure market in New York on Long Island, is we liked those markets and we thought, well, what in Florida is avoiding this glut of condos or these high price per square foot condo inventories? And we realized that there was an opening for boutique hotels that we could buy and turn into investment condos that people could kind of own, and we could help them rent them out when they weren't using it. And what that allowed us to tell investors in this strategy was pretty simple. We're going to buy a hotel, and owning hotels is risky, but we're going to take those hotel units and turn them into pretty high-end investment condo units. We're going to sell them, and then we're not going to own the hotel anymore. We're just going to manage the hotel, and it's not going to be a hotel. It's going to be investment condos, and we're going to manage those units and collect part of the revenue without having any of that risk. And people responded very, very well to that. And the same goes for what we're doing out in the Hamptons, which is we're going to find short-term rental single family properties. But what we want to do is we want to upgrade those properties, turn them into higher end, larger homes, ideally have a buyer lined up to buy it once we're done with the value add, or in some cases, the ground up development. And that's also a pretty low risk opportunity. We really mitigated that risk because if we don't like the market, we can wait for 3 or 6 months. We do like the market, but if for some reason we want to take a little bit more time with that particular project, we certainly can because it's already performing very well for us as a short-term rental.
I think that's a great idea because it's like risk calculated from both ends. You're also pleasing the client so they can enjoy their luxury house as well as renting it. So there's not really money being wasted in any way.
Also, thank you. And, also what I'm doing is because I was working for these larger institutional clients at Weld Capital, I'm bringing that same sort of institutional approach and private equity, more discreet approach. I'm not saying like some syndicators might or some other groups might get institutional returns, even though you're not an institution, and then not following through on that necessarily. What I'm doing is I'm bringing that institutional strategy to smaller projects that, say, the average house flipper might not be doing, and making it something very scalable. We can do it once and we can do it again and again. And I can help do that in terms of the institutional grade, financial model and the network I have with lenders and the network I have with limited partners. So if you've been only using your own money to flip houses, in our case, out in the Hamptons, let me help and let me be a part of that general partnership. And we can start pulling in LPs for deals and start scaling this faster and more profitably. And that's kind of what a lot of my partners and my clients have been drawn to.
That's really insightful. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's talk about the engine of the business, relationships. So, how do you and your team actually structure those lasting, sticking partnerships that keep deals flowing for years?
Sure. That's a tough one. It's on the surface, it's a complicated thing to do. But once again, I think it comes down to what's worked for years, which is staying in touch with the people that you think have the most talent, the most potential, and the most to offer, and treating people the way you like to be treated, being very honest. When you don't have the answer, let them know. When you tell them something, mean it and follow through. And, I work with partners and clients in a way that I'm showing them exactly where I think the strengths are, where there could be improvement. When you talk to people very honestly and openly and candidly, they respond very positively to it. So I'm much more one-on-one, and I try to be as forthright as possible, always.
That is, to me, it's very important because although we have so many tools right now to gain customers, followers, anything, but there's nothing like the human touch. There's nothing like looking to your clients, being transparent, being honest, being you, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easiest to be you when you're talking about something that you know and you love.
That is amazing. I was going to ask about your network. Your developer investor network is practically legendary. Can you give us a quick explosive example? What has been the single biggest win that came out of Weld's exclusive network?
Okay, sure. This was a deal that was probably 4 or 5 years ago. It was, an originator who was very talented, out on the West Coast, and COVID was kind of just starting, and people were leaving LA, people were leaving San Francisco, and there was not enough single family inventory out there. And there were good builders that couldn't get loans to build the houses that people really wanted to buy. And I was in New York City and I was thinking, well, these lenders and these banks that are owed money by these big office buildings in New York City and these hotels in New York City, well, they're not foreclosing on these big properties because they don't want those big properties on their balance sheet. They don't want to take it over. It's not performing. It's no good. So there was all this money that was expecting to be able to go in and buy these big office towers and buy these big hotels for cents on the dollar, but they weren't available. The banks weren't foreclosing. So I thought, well, where is all this money going to go? And I think that's the most important thing to do when you're trying to come up with a project or a strategy is where's the opportunity? What were people expecting and what's actually happening and what's going to happen? And so I got that right. Instead of trying to put together a buyer with an office building that wouldn't ever be for sale, I put together what's called a lender to lenders. So a big group that lends money to lenders that then lend that to builders. And I structured $20 million a month for 3 years. So a larger lender in New York City who was hoping to give money to buy office buildings. Instead, I convinced him to give money to a lender across the country to give smaller amounts of money to West Coast builders. So that was kind of a larger ticket price sort of deal. And I'm proud of it because I was one of the first people to realize that the money wasn't going to go there. It was going to go there or there.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. What a smart and bold move. Congratulations on that.
Well, thanks, Angelina. Yeah.
Alrighty. So for everyone listening and taking notes, what do the commercial real estate rockstars do differently? So what do you do differently?
I find rock stars. That's the difference. So with every project that I've put together myself, or even with my clients, and these are, these can be pretty well-known sort of rock star clients. No matter what, I'll look at something that I want to do and I'll always say to myself, well, what am I missing? How can this be better? And it might be someone to help me raise money. It might be someone who has done property management down in Florida before, which I haven't done, for larger groups that have been doing hotels for a long time. Maybe you need to look at a boutique hotel model. Maybe I need to partner a property manager rock star. So by not being the rock star and making sure that the partnership is super strong with a lot of very talented people, it's much like a band. You might have your front man, but what makes, the Beatles great or any of these bands is that everyone is very good at their job. And sometimes you have to bring in that, the Miley Cyrus or whoever, right? But generally speaking, I try to put together a great band and not just be that one rock star. And that generally works out in my favor.
Yeah, essentially it's like a team effort.
Absolutely. Always has been.
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you so much.
Of course.